Society.
Strangers. Strangers in society.
Strangers on the internet.
The secret.
Strangers.
Society. Oh, welcome, stranger.
Secret to society. Strangers.
Society.
Welcome to the secret society.
Strangers? Welcome back to another meeting of the Secret Society of Strangers podcast. Lee here as always. Josh, Jen, not Jane.
Nope,
Jan.
not Jane.
Not Jane, but what to do, everybody?
I mean, I'm like, again, hands off. I'm chilling this week.
Yeah, no, I'm out of the captain's chair finally.
Yeah.
It's an
3 episodes worth.
Yeah, that was epic.
You shouldered a lot, almost all of the month.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Squeezing this one in here to close the March up and move on to Alien April,
Super hyped.
Why not? It's our show.
right?
Yeah.
Do what the fuck we want.
It's our show. We could do whatever we want.
That being said, I don't even know what we're doing, and it's our show.
Oh.
So
Well, I decided we would have a nice, not lighthearted, Lee will be disappointed segue from what we just talked about with a lot of murder and coming up with the aliens. But I read an awesome book called Witchfinders, and it talks about a 17th century witch hunt that happened in Essex, so the more eastern part of England. And the term, just to set us off right, witchfinder was someone that parishes would hire to, they were supposed to have like a special skill set in
Like The Witcher.
detecting witches.
Yeah.
So were they super special skill set at this? Probably no, not. They were not.
Probably not.
That was a lie. So we'll start off just with a little bit of history. I will say with that book, this will just be a nice high level kind of overview, but that book goes into great detail. So if you're super fascinated with this stuff, you will absolutely love that book. So to kick us off, it definitely medieval folks were not, they were very accustomed to witches and their spells and the evil that they represented. That came down all the way from 1484 with Pope Innocent the Eighth. He declared this to be so, and therefore it was so. And
Therefore,
so-
it was that it is decided.
It
And-
happened.
yeah, and
Just
so you'll
picturing like Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah, and so this basically kicks off the witch hunts across Europe, and this lasts for nearly 200 years.
Oh.
Just this one guy deciding. So religious tensions are always, unfortunately, going to be a big catalyst for these major witch hunts that kick off. Not that there's not throughout a few here and there trials that would happen, and so would be accused, but usually when there were times of major turmoil with the monarchy, with, in this case, it's English Civil War that really propels the witch hunt that we'll be talking about. And that Civil War involved the monarchy, politics, and religion. And just to keep in mind that politics and religion were totally married at this point in time. So there was definitely no separation of anything. And both sides just lose in that because it created a lot of havoc. So this is what's happening at this point. You've got a society that is thrown into total chaos. Some people are starving. You've got, much like we ended up having a couple hundred years later in America, Civil War is exactly what you would think. So you've got, families fighting families and sides and choosing sides and all this stuff. And so these people in this particular part of England are not really used to seeing this or having this be so much in their face. So it's even more confronting to have the war and all the bad things that come along with war, the uncertainty, the death, and then again, just everything else that's going on. And you still have people dying from paper cuts. And
It's
the
horrible.
plague, the
Yeah,
plague
the
is still a
imagery
thing.
is terrible.
Yeah, it's just not a good time for anybody.
No. So you can see where, you're going to start to see what people do, what we do in society. People start looking for scapegoats when things are not going right, when people are stressed, when there's economic downturn, you name it. We've seen this over and over in history. So that just kind of sets the scene a little bit for how we're going to get here. So a little bit though about the monarchy that is important to this. So King James, he was the 6th of Scotland, the 1st of England. Not to get too far in the weeds on that, but he married those two kingdoms together at this time. That's all I'm going to go into about that.
Scottish is still not having it.
They're just not
Yeah.
hype.
So, yeah, we're going to leave that alone. But it did happen. And he was a keen believer in witchcraft, witchery, and all the things. He wrote a book called Demonology. It was a bestseller. Could have just been because he was king, but either
Being king
way,
has its perks.
Sounds so familiar.
I mean, he could
Ooh.
also just mandate that everybody read his book, but no, he's taken part in at least one interrogation of a suspected witch. So when you've got lately, like you were probably thinking, gonna say, I mean, we all know, no matter what country you're in and no matter what time you're in, whoever your fearless leader is, it can influence culture and beliefs, and that all trickles down, good or bad.
Facts.
Often more the bad than the good, it seems sometimes. But it
And-
happened. So he's not gonna actually be he's gonna die and whatever before
Hooray!
before this
I'm no
happens.
longer oppressed.
No.
Now there's like a
And
5-year-old that's king. Woo!
there's a yeah, there's a nice thought,
Did you
but
elect this person? Because I did not
and
elect this person.
I mean, spoiler alert, they end up beheading the next guy. I think it was Charles the first or whatever. But
Ooh.
so that didn't go super well either. When Charles comes in, he's not so much all about this, but it doesn't really matter because everything's gone to shit. And we already have from the 1454 Pope to, our most recent long ruling, monarchy that king that it is a big believer in witchcraft and the dark arts and all of these things. He really was interested in anything dark magic, all of that, not just witches. So we're going to jump in to our give a little biography of our main witch finder. And I will say he gives himself this title. It's like Witch Finder General. So it's kind of like giving yourself a nickname. It's kind of ick, but he did it and that's what happened. So his name is Matthew Hopkins. And parish records indicate that he was born in Suffolk sometime around 1619. He was the fourth son of James Hopkins, who was a minister. Very important to note, they are staunch Puritans. So he is raised as a Puritan, which basically means hardcore.
No fun. There's no fucking about. Like, you were
Correct. Just
miserable as fuck.
try to never be happy, correct. So that is how he is raised. And even more so with his father being a minister, I would imagine had to have
Oh.
been even more so. But his children are highly educated, except for Matthew.
Just
He
fuck Matthew, right? Everybody else has a dope education, and then Matthew.
I don't know. Maybe they were just tired. He was the youngest. I don't know. But he did not go to university or follow in his father's footsteps and enter the church, to be a minister or anything like that. Like at least one of his brothers did. However, there's not a lot of records, on him about some of this stuff, but there's speculation he could have gone abroad, but we don't know. We like to think of him as an idiot.
He went to
really.
Hogwarts.
You went to Hogwarts.
So there's some people will say if you look him up that he was a lawyer. Likely no, he was not. He was like an apprentice or like a secretary to a lawyer, that kind of thing. But he did make it his lifelong mission. He felt like he needed to have some sort of mission in life. I don't know if that's because he didn't get the education and all the other things that his other siblings got where they felt like they had a path in life and he just seemed to, not have like that strong career of his own or whatever. But
High school dropout.
he, I mean, but he apparently comes to determine that it is his mission to destroy anything to do with the works of the devil.
Big
So
goal.
Big Puritan goals.
So he ends up moving to Essex, that area to the eastern part of England, and he believes that there are several witches that are regularly practicing their dark arts very close to his home. And so this is what kind of gets him started. So apparently from his window, he is claiming that he's overheard various women of the village discussing their meetings with the devil. And this starts about March of 1644.
Hmm.
So he hard to really determine whether that actually ever happened or not, or how he really got to this point, because he really was so self-appointed in this that it's kind of hard not to just picture him like after his day of work as an assistant, not the lawyer, trying to find his earth's purpose, and what it could be. But he does assume his title of Witchfinder General in 1645, he claims that he was officially commissioned by Parliament to
I feel like this is
uncover.
very self-appointed.
Yeah, it's real smooth. Just say it and fake
Yeah,
it
Say it
till
and
you
it's
make it.
true.
Yeah.
Anything with
uh,
confidence.
yeah. Well, he did that. He had confidence, so that it was his, that he had been appointed to uncover and then prosecute witches. So he does gather an entourage that included some, quote, what they called lady prickers. And we'll talk a little bit about that. They would assist him in determining and the methodology that was used at the time to, one of them to determine if you were a witch or not. So what they would do, they would travel the villages, towns of Eastern England, trying and examining witch women for witchcraft, mostly women. I mean, there were some men, but predominantly, as always, it was typically women.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question if anybody, like, any dudes got caught up for that.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely did, but from what I know a lot, they were acquitted more often, but it just wasn't to the same degree. I mean, because they
Yeah,
would have a higher standing in society in the first
true.
place to yeah.
It's just man.
Then it's just
Um,
off with your head with everybody else.
Do we know what like causes suspicion of being a witch at
Yeah,
this
what's the
time?
criteria for witchery?
Um, yeah, we will get into that
Oh my.
here, I think, in just a little bit. I wanted to just kind of go ahead and start with who he was and then a broad overview of kind of how this went. So we kind of, once we get into the victims and stuff, we'll kind of know the whole deal. So, of course, what he's doing comes at a price. He's getting paid, to do this. He would say that it was a very, reasonable price, about 20 shillings a town, but there's records that show that at least like in Stowe Market that he was paid £23 for his
Ooh.
services. But he did turn this during this time into a well-paid career, and towns were actually levying taxes on the citizens to be able to afford these witch finders to come in and cleanse their village of these horrible, scary witches.
Find them witches.
Toss a coin to your witcher, man.
Yeah. Many of the methods that he would use were taken from the king's book, Demonology, that to determine, if someone
Mhm.
was a witch or not. And this I will if there's credit to be given, it was less violent than what we had seen previously or even after that or in other parts of England or Scotland. So I can't say that, he was one of the absolute worst, but it still wasn't good. I mean, he still did do the typical, keeping someone awake for days on end, to get a suspect from sleep deprivation, to get people
Say
to say,
something.
yeah, and various other ways to, try to coerce people into confessing. And so his lady pickers, so their job involved cutting the arm of the accused with, a knife, needle, or pen. It was typically more like a needle or a pen
Mhm.
kind of thing. And if she didn't bleed, then she wasn't a witch. However, they wasn't uncommon for them to use like retractable
Already
prickers.
scamming the game. Like it's
Already a
already
scam.
So, of course,
woo as to be, and they're
they're
like,
not
yeah,
gonna
let's make
believe, and they're witches, right. So, but Hopkins, he did enjoy the swimming test as one of his favorite methods. They felt that that was very simple and very effective, although obviously it's absolute ignorance.
What
But
was
they
the
would
swimming
it.
test?
oh,
Negative no matter what. Like it doesn't
Yeah,
it
what
yeah.
is
doesn't
that?
prove anything.
Okay, so what the swimming test is you would bind the arms and legs of the accused and or put them in a chair before throwing them into like the pond, the village pond. So if they sank and drowned, they're innocent and they went to heaven. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
Um,
okay. Oh,
but if
that's
they
so much better.
if they floated, then you're going to be tried as a witch because that's going to be something, yeah,
So
that's
either way,
proving
you're dead.
correct.
just
Now,
kill him right there.
Yeah,
Just
just
kill
right.
him. Why
I
are we doing
will
this?
say that in some places and at different times, some people at least recognize this was ignorant and they would started using different methods. I'm not quite clear if Hopkins did this or not, but where they would do some sort of method basically, like where they would tie rope like to the chair from shore. So that way, if they sank, they could get them out quick. So that if there's any consolation
Hopefully.
in that, that's
Like, hey,
that's where
my
we're
bad. You clearly almost died. You're not a witch. That's on us.
Yeah. So between the years of 1644 and 1646, so we're not even talking a very long span of time here. I don't even think it quite ended up being 2 years actually, but Hopkins and his associates are thought to have been responsible for the deaths of 300 women. So when they say associates, though, this
There
would
you go.
not have been as many like Hopkins directly. So he's not, like I said, he's not the only guy out there,
Right.
doing this. It's a decent sized country. But indirectly, he very well could have been because, he was fairly well known and, people learn from other people's methods and that kind of thing. So in the days, an average farm worker's wage was maybe 6 pence a day. It's, estimated that he could have gotten around £1,000 for his services. So that just tells you how lucrative it was for him to be
Yeah.
successful in, finding witches and clearing these towns of these, terrible vermin. Just to give an example of how this craze can kind of start. I've titled my section here like, air quote witches. During so this is kind of going back a little bit before, but this will just kind of show how in these villages these things could kind of get started and just, people would marinate on it and then with each passing little slight that might happen to them or even their farm animal or whatever that they start thinking a little too much and a little too hard about simple things. So during Christmas of 1643, the wife of John Rivet, he was a Manningtree tailor, and Manningtree is actually the specific village where most of this starts and where Matthew Hopkins makes his residence. So she falls what they called unaccountably ill. So basically, they have no idea why, which not uncommon,
It's
but
all
No,
everything.
everything.
either way, they act like this is a surprise. I don't know. So Rivet becomes convinced that a local woman, Elizabeth Clark, had cursed his wife. So Clark, very predictably, was elderly, poor, and unfortunately for her, she was the daughter of a convicted witch.
Oh shit.
So, yeah.
Doesn't look good.
And no, I'll right off the bat. So Matthew Hopkins, he hears about this story as you're going to do when you move into like a new town or whatever, you kind of get the local lore, right? We do that even today. So of course you're going to, they're going to do the exact same thing. So he is immediately sensing an opportunity. We know this. So he ends up hooking up with another guy called John Stern, a local quote gentleman, and another local
Quote,
woman.
gentlemen.
Yeah, they like I feel that was again self-proclaimed, but another local woman, Mary Phillips, who they called Goody, which far from it. So those three, so she ends up being like one of the like lady prickers, basically, is what her role is because we can't have the men going and checking for like birthmarks on naked women's bodies and
Oh
whatever. So
no,
that's
man,
Oh
that
yeah,
where
hurts.
no, that is not okay.
Mary comes in. So this Mary
Traitor.
trio here, they arrest and interrogate Elizabeth Clark. And using the thorn in there in Manning Tree, Hopkins basically manages to persuade Elizabeth Clark to confess to her witchcraft.
That's gotta be so insane. Imagine being in that position. Like, obviously, you're not a witch, but the only way they're gonna even stop is
Mhm.
you saying you're a witch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no way out of it.
And so I want to just read the account of how this went down. And so Clark basically, she offers to show Hopkins and John Stern her imps as long as they promise not to hurt her. And so I'm going to read through here. It's a bit lengthy, but I think it's well worth it. So this is the account from Elizabeth. So this is, like I said, an interrogation. So there's a little bit of back and forth here. So just for context. And apparently they called her Bess, like as her nickname. So, Bess, she was asked, hath the devil had the use of your body? She wondered why her examiner wanted to know such a thing, to which he replied chastely on behalf of all present, I desire to know the truth and no otherwise. Elizabeth Clark sighed, then said, it is true. The impact of those 3 words was dramatic. Matthew Hopkins asked her in what form the devil had come to her. Clark retorted, a tall, proper, black-haired gentleman, a properer man than yourself, which I'm sure went over like a fart in church, but asked by Stern with whom she would rather share a bed, she had no doubt, the devil. Clark related fondly how she had first enjoyed carnal copulation with Satan 6 or 7 years earlier. From that time, he had been a regular visitor to her bedchamber, always presentable in his lace collar and ready with his breathy plea, Bess, I must have you. She had never refused, and their lovemaking usually lasted half the night.
Lies.
Yeah.
And priest while this is going on.
Yeah, so much self-proclivity.
Where's the what?
Where's the priest while all this
Oh,
is
yeah.
happening?
No, none of that. As if the shock of this was not enough, the watchers, they called them watchers because, again, she's doing this after she has been sleep deprived and under constant watch by at least Goody, for 3 days was typical. Her every move, everything in her, has been under scrutiny. So
Picture
whether
of Goody in my head that's like, you see the Hateful Eight,
Oh yeah.
you know, the woman that he's transporting?
Yeah.
Fucking crazy. Like, that's who I pictured. Like, that's Goody. Just get out of her mind.
So the watchers were warned of the imminent arrival of her imps. So here we go. So this is another major indicator that you might be a witch if you have imps. And Clark had a plenty. So Clark first called out the name Holt. Before their eyes crept a white creature, like a cat but smaller, which silently greeted its mistress before retreating into the shadows. Next, she called Germara. According to Hopkins, there appeared an imp like to a dog, which was white with some sandy spots and seemed to be very fat and plump, with very short legs, who forthwith vanished away. The one after that, I love this, Vinegar Tom, Stern described as like a greyhound with legs as long as a stag. There
What?
followed,
That is so tall.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking like Irish wolfhound or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vinegar Tom, you said?
Vinegar Tom was the name of this one, yeah.
A new nickname. I'm changing my name on
I know, I loved it. I was like, there followed an imp resembling a polecat or ferret and one like a toad. Were there more? Asked Hopkins. The same ones would return in different shapes, Clark replied. But there was another who had not yet appeared, a black beast called Sanctioned Sugar.
And sugar.
It would be home soon, she promised, and would tear Master Stern into pieces for trying to have her swum in the river. But when Sanctioned Sugar finally arrived, it seemed to be no more than a harmless rabbit. Nonetheless, Clark assured Stern he was lucky it had not leapt onto his face, squeezed itself down his throat and deposited a feast of toads in his belly.
Damn.
What? That's wicked.
Yeah.
That is super
I
sick.
love her for that. Sleep deprived and whatever or not. I mean,
So
that was
he's
pretty
seeing
brazen.
these things? He's seeing imps?
Yeah. And
Alleged.
so
Yeah,
we're gonna have a picture of that of a drawing of that whole scene,
Oh,
that
Hmm.
that is
chaotic scene there. So, and that's what, the author of this book goes on to say, with so many witnesses present, they couldn't have lied about those events,
No way.
not at
Um,
all.
but it but yeah.
Conspiracy never.
With the
Yeah.
what?
So, unfortunately, as would happen in these interrogations, Clark also does end up implicating several other local women, and she says basically Ann West and her daughter Rebecca, Ann Leach, Helen Clark, Elizabeth Gooding. She also claims there's other witches from the surrounding area that join their Manning Tree sisters for bots that are held every 6 weeks in the town, which he's probably thinking in his mind, that's what I saw or heard out my window. They got him kind of all, cray cray about this whole thing, I think, in the first place.
Name Goody? I played Goody. Like, she's a
100%.
witch.
Well,
Goody is a witch.
yeah. So anyway, all of those women and more end up being sent to trial and had various outcomes, and we'll kind of get into that though in a little bit. So in all, in that area, there were 29 women that were condemned to hang. And again, keep in mind this is going on in other towns, too. It's not just him. So that's how we're getting to that total of, around the same time, upwards of, 300. So obviously the witch hysteria is in full force. His career and his close associate, John Stern, they are rolling in the money. This is a great business for them. And, let's be honest, that's what it was. It was a
Right.
business. S- Stern, Goody, and Matthew, they continue their tour around Southeast England, offering their services. The hysterical accusations everywhere they go just ramp up while they're there. I can't imagine why, especially, I'm sure he's telling people about, all the things that he has seen and heard and these confessions, that he's extracted in these neighboring towns. And again, we've got a, war going on. People are starving. Times are as uncertain as they, could be.
Yeah, and
And
people
so,
believe like outlandish things are reality at this time period.
yeah.
Yeah.
All the magic, all that stuff is real.
Mhm.
Like,
There's
dude
no-
just said
Yeah.
he saw these imps.
Yeah, I know. It's wild.
Mhm.
I couldn't imagine just having someone knock on your door. Like you don't know nothing. You know that you're sitting by the fire doing whatever you're doing,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden they're like, "You're a witch."
Right.
Like,
And now you
but
have
I'm
to
not, though.
prove
But I'm not.
otherwise. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so that's, again, going back a little bit to the methodology. So interestingly, during this time, torture was illegal in England, which kind of surprised me because I didn't
what's
really,
Oh,
the
that's all they. I
definition?
thought. Yeah, I thought that's all they did was torture people.
well,
Like,
you know,
it could be like detaining someone for X amount of days equals torture. Like capturing someone for a couple hours and beating the shit out of them, dunking their head in water, and like
yeah.
maybe
So
that's not torture.
apparently the rack and drawing and quartering and things like that, that was apparently torture. So
Okay.
what, like this author says, so Hopkins basically had to just be subtle about his methods of torture, just like you said. And so suspected witches would be, like I kind of alluded to earlier, handed over to Goody Phillips. And she would
Fucking bitch.
also have a few locally appointed. So there you have them coming into a village and now bringing in, that these other people, creating that hysteria. And so they'd have locally appointed searchers too to help. So they would strip down the victim and search her for witches' marks. So any marks that they may find. So this could be a mole. This could be a birthmark. That it could be I
Dirt.
mean,
Yeah,
that's what I
anything.
was trying to think. Like, it literally could be an abrasion, probably
Oh,
working
God,
out,
no.
But any marks were then pricked to test them to see if they were the devil's marks. So again, like I'd said, they were responsible for watching the suspect closely, most of the time, days on end. So this was basically to see if a familiar would approach the witch.
Well, I'm
But
dead.
oh, I don't know if you're this dead to make sure it wasn't suckling your teeth.
Nope, doesn't do that. I'm good there. I'm totally good there.
I'm glad to hear it.
Now
Thank
you're
Right
not.
God.
there.
Thank God.
I have nipples, Greg. Can you milk me?
Mental images now. I wish I'd.
He's upstairs.
When you
too, my
said that, I was
familiar.
like, oh God, I can't wait to say suckling his teeth.
Oh, that's perfect. Here, I got this. This look. It's a little foot.
The
It's
foot.
wet. Oh, foot out.
Oh God. So yeah, familiars. Let's see. But it was also as a form of psychological torture, as we obviously could see that now, and a way of breaking down the subject. I can't imagine if you've got three people that are convinced you're guilty. I don't imagine they're just sitting in a corner of your house staring at you for 3 days. I
Just
I
hooded up,
imagine,
creepy as fuck.
which that's creepy enough. Yeah, like
They're
yeah.
just a stranger in the back of the tavern, man.
I mean, that's bad enough, but I would imagine they're also saying things and that I would imagine. But also during this time, the suspected witch could be starved, certainly deprived of sleep in an attempt to make them more susceptible to confessing. Let's see. So Hopkins also would often bind his victims cross-legged on a table or a stool and leave them in this position without any break for 24 hours. So if anybody's ever done that thing, I'm famous for it while I'm working, sitting like on my other foot, and then I get up and
Oh, it's
about
literally how I sit for this. I sit cross-legged.
And your
hit the
legs don't work.
ground when you
Feel
go
it.
to get up, and that's
Oh,
like
my
not
legs
even
work. I got the good
okay.
legs.
Some of us are different. That's good.
That's that
Um,
young,
But no,
that's
sometimes
that
I do
young
fall asleep.
circulation.
And I'm just like,
Give 'em
oh,
the free
fuck. I have legs.
I hope it happens after this episode now.
It's probably now that I've been talking shit.
Or he would force them to continually walk while barefoot until their feet were blistered, which
My
is
childhood.
also very bad.
It's just because, like, what? Everybody.
What is that
Anybody
proving?
you do this stuff to.
Yeah.
Anybody
Yeah.
is gonna fail these tests or whatever.
Right.
Trials
And
and
then
tribulations.
again, but his absolute most favorite was the swimming test, which we've already talked about. And, again, most of Hopkins' victims, and not just him, in most witch hunts were women just like Elizabeth Clark. They were old, alone, poor, widowed. A lot of them are widows, which is really sad because what are they supposed to really do? It's literally a man's world. and
Is there a
and
greater conspiracy there? Like, is there like a thinning the herd? Like, what is the greater purpose that, like,
yeah,
they became such a target?
well, and I'll save sort of that towards the end. I have a section at the end for us to kind of talk about how this happens throughout history. But there were a few clergymen that were implicated, mainly because they were starting to be like, what are we doing? This makes no sense. And speaking out. So then magically, they're also witches.
Because you didn't go with the narrative. Now you're a witch.
Yeah.
Just blood splattered on your face. They're just like, what are we
Mhm.
doing?
Witch.
Yeah. There was one in particular in the summer of 1645. He was a minister in Suffolk, the Reverend Lowes. He was 70 years old, and
I prefer Home Depot.
he was described as quarrelsome and wasn't super liked by his parishioners. So he is one that speaks up, speaks his mind about what's going on, and everyone turns on him. Of course, he denies his guilt, but Hopkins tortures him until he confesses. And the quote
course.
is, keeping him awake several nights together while running him backwards and forwards about his cell until he was out of breath. So he had actually been imprisoned.
God dang.
After a brief rest, the exercise began again and continued for several days and nights till he was weary of his life and scarce sensible of what he said or did.
Yeah, and at that point, you're like, yeah, just kill me at this point. Absolutely. I'm a
I'm
witch.
done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. Think about how delirious you get, like, after, like, a long, long day.
Yeah.
Like a travel day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
where you go on vacation and then, like, you go sightsee and then you come back to your hotel and, like, you're hanging out with whoever you're with and you're like, you just get, like, the giggles and shit with them because you're just like, I'm so fucking tired.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
delusional. Yeah.
Well, and just think about what we know now about false confessions, that we've got people, now being freed from prisons, today with DNA and things like that when they had confessed, and their conditions are nowhere near the actual physical,
No,
like,
No.
torture
no,
that's
they usually
going
just
on
corrupt cops. That's all.
in conjunction with. So these people are getting just, getting it from both sides. So as we kind of start winding down this crazy time of Matthew Hopkins, like I said, it had been witch finding had been a very profitable business for Hopkins and his team. He had been paid, well above what, typical, wages could have been. I'm sure more than as an assistant to a lawyer or whatever it was that he did for that lawyer. And
Is
but
he like towns like broke? Like,
Hmm?
is he like leaving towns broke? Is he like
Yeah, just
taking all
taking all
the
their
money
money.
and then
Yeah,
leaving?
so as it I'll
He's a
kinda get
flim
into
flam
that
man.
a little bit, but as it turns out, especially towards the end, because like I said, they were having to levy taxes on the population, the people
Just to pay
to
for
to
him.
pay for this, and so the tides definitely start turning. So you kinda have the war that's it's wrapping up. It's definitely not over, the Civil War, but, it's wrapping up, but then as these things do, they kind of run their course and people start
Mhm.
to kind of wake up and be like, well, now wait a minute, that doesn't make much sense. Or you finally get the wrong or the right people accused that can actually, you know, probably people that have more power
Right.
or,
Because
standing
you're gonna
in.
start running out of poor people to hang.
I mean, yeah,
Eventually,
eventually it
Yeah.
starts to get ridiculous, and I'm sure people start spilling everybody's secrets
Oh,
in
yeah.
these small towns,
I'm
and it
not a witch, but
becomes
I'll tell you who is. That bitch Becky, 3
and they
doors
start
down.
telling people's business and whatever. I mean, that's a very real thing. A lot of skeletons
I
start
saw her
coming out of.
dancing around her fireplace. In
She's
reality, Becky just stubbed her toe and she was like, "God damn it."
yeah, but then he leaves town and they all continue to have conversations and realize like, oh fuck.
Yeah,
Oh shit, we
yeah,
killed
Oh, fuck.
Karen.
Guys,
yeah,
guys, we fucked up.
We just straight up committed
yeah.
murder. There was nope. She just had a cat.
None of
Damn
us
it.
are
So
going to heaven, if you were
yeah.
wondering.
And a lot of, especially towards the end, Matthew Hopkins, it's not really mentioned, but it is mentioned with John Stern that he was owed quite a bit of money from these towns, that he opted not to collect on or to seek, like legal recourse to make these
Right.
towns pay him. But basically, if Hopkins or Stern had hoped to use any of this business model, all of these good works in their mind, that they were doing to propel him to like greater heights in society or whatever, he was definitely sadly mistaken. Like I said, the tide had definitely turned against the Witchfinder General. People really got tired of the witch craze, as we said, when it started to hit their own pockets. And that they started figuring out too that it might have been a business all along, that it was just for the money. So of course Hopkins is denying these claims as much as he possibly can. And he says he was only ever visited towns that had actually specifically invited him to come in. Yeah, right.
Lies.
And he said any funds that he received barely covered his expenses and or he would receive voluntary donations out of thanks.
Mm.
But people were really by this point, they're just not having it.
Because they're
So,
they're getting wise. They know that it's a sham.
Yeah, and so finally in the spring of 1646, a small country vicar, he finds the courage to make a very public stand against Hopkins. His name was John Gall, and I've been trying to, like, I never can say this some of these English towns, but it was Huntingdonshire. I don't think I actually got it.
Oh, that was good.
That was
Perfect.
pretty good, actually. I didn't add, like, 3 extra syllables. So, he
Worcestershire.
pretty much, yeah. So, he takes to his pulpit, he openly preaches against Hopkins, and it catches on. So, he begins to collect evidence of Hopkins' abuses and publishes them in a pamphlet. They love their pamphlets. Select cases of conscience towards witches and witchcraft. So, it's said that this pamphlet book, whatever, was very well written and it very convincing enough to win public favor. And now Hopkins' reputation is just kaput. It's pretty much done.
Dunzo.
So, but he's not done. Hopkins is not done. These people never are. They're exhausting. In
But wait, there's more.
1647, yeah, pretty much. In 1647, in an attempt to revive his credibility, Hopkins publishes his own pamphlet, and you'll love the title, The Discovery of Witches.
Mm.
And I meant to see if that whole Netflix or, Amazon
Oh
show,
yeah,
if
there was
that
the
was,
show.
and I forgot, but,
Oh.
yeah, it's been on my favorites or watch list forever, but
Mhm.
I haven't watched it, so, Lee's gonna tell us here. So the booklet that Hopkins is he's put out to save his reputation, attempted to answer many of the questions that his critics had raised regarding his motives and his methods, but his explanations were vague or very unoriginal, and again, people recognized it from using, like, from demonology from the King's, book and stuff. So, anyway, it failed in its purpose. Times were changing, and Civil War is now over. Everybody's happy with Charles the First for now, not for long, but they're okay. But basically, yeah, the social hysteria that had led to all this, was now kinda over, and people were just kinda like, "Oh, okay, we're good now." So, basically, Matthew Hopkins then disappears from historical record. There was, and I wish it was true, a big, like, rumor that he ended up being executed for witchcraft, but that's not true. He actually died in his, like, late 20s from tuberculosis, so it
He was
wasn't.
only in his 20s when he was doing all this.
That's
Yes.
insane. So
Yes,
young.
and Stern was in his 30s. So, yeah, they were not old men for sure,
So
but,
is this also, I wonder, is this a way to not go to war? Like, what was their what like the draft men?
do what now?
Do they
What?
draft men for war? Like, so there's a civil war going on.
Yeah.
Is he doing this to like not
No.
Oh,
participate in
no.
war?
Not
No.
participating.
No.
I didn't
Mm-mm.
like he's that
No.
age. That's the only what I was thinking. Like
No, and I think this is just more a time when he
flat
came
feet.
from a family that was respected and, decently well-to-do. I mean, his father was able to, like, leave him an inheritance, nothing crazy, but more than
Well
most people
off.
got. Well, not just him, but, his siblings, his mother, that kinda thing. So, I think it was just more of a people were expected to live up to that, and it just wasn't, it wasn't happening for him for whatever reason. So, but they're still not done yet because John Stern's not done trying to save his reputation too. So, John Stern ends up writing his own book, and it was very original, A Confirmation and Discovery of Witchcraft. And he writes that in 1648. And it, again, does absolutely nothing for him either to restore his reputation. Apparently, he did a lot of plagiarism from some
Mm.
other works at the time or that had been written just a few years prior, tries to justify like Hopkins had done. Nobody really reads it. Apparently, it's terribly written. He can't write it. I mean, he can, but not well. And so
Oh,
it's
chicken
a whole
scratch.
it's a whole thing. So he dies many years later. He's decent age and all that jazz. So, a little bit about some of the victims. And first we'll talk about the jail where if you before your trial where you were held. The jail that prisoners were kept in had been slowly crumbling for only like about 3 centuries. So it had been like a great castle, and then, it's not. And so in 1630, a big part of the roof apparently had collapsed, leaving prisoners exposed to the elements. Jailers beat the prisoners regularly, were very well known for their cruelty. All prisoners slept on bare stone, dirty straw, barely fed, so malnutrition is huge. Some were punished even further by being shackled hands and feet indefinitely. A special punishment could include being kept alone in a hole dug in the ground for long periods of time, so no light, damp, the whole nine, no,
Cold,
interaction.
wet.
Yeah.
Everything is wet there all the time.
So-
Yeah.
Prisoners routinely died before they ever made it to trial of what they called jail fever.
Oh
I
my
wonder
God.
why.
So
It-
I felt so there.
so creepy.
What's known of some of the victims, I'll go through just to kind of somewhat close this out a little bit, because I think it bears to be told after talking about those idiots for a little while. We have Elizabeth Gibson. She was approximately 40 years old, farmer's wife. Record shows she died from the plague in jail before her trial could ever take place. Mary Coppin.
Probably lucky, all right?
Did you just say Mary Poppins?
Coppin.
Oh.
She was reprieved after being sentenced to death, but record shows she was still in jail in 1648, so we don't know if she ever got out.
She knew.
Probably not. Helen Breton was hanged as a witch for bewitching a person, a male, to death in 1645. Rebecca Jones was a servant when she was alleged to have been given 3 imps or familiars in the form of moles by the devil himself. Also accused of killing a pig, tormenting a child, and the murder of a couple. Rebecca was hanged as a witch in 1645. Joan Cooper was an 80-year-old widow, died of plague in the jail before going to trial. Mary Wiles was a widow, and she was hanged. Rebecca West was persuaded to turn chief witness against other women, one of which was her mother.
Damn,
Ann
she
West.
snitched on her own mom.
Yeah. So Ann West, the mother, was hanged in Manningtree, having been accused by her daughter.
That's cold.
See.
No love in them streets.
So just off, like out of nowhere, this has nothing to do with witches, but these are surprisingly common names for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
usually the names are like unpronounceable, but like Helen, Rebecca,
Mary.
Yeah.
surprised. As they're older than I thought they considered witches. I always thought witches were considered, or were younger when they accused them.
Maybe that was just us in Salem. Ann Cooper accused of suckling familiars, offering her daughter a familiar, which was a kitten named Tomboy, and of using them for murder. She was executed by hanging. Mary Greenleaf, 84-year-old widow. She was accused by Susan Sparrow of having a familiar in the shape of a hare, which had plagued Susan's teenage daughter when they had shared a house with Mary. Mary denied being a witch, but died in jail after her trial was postponed, probably due to lack of evidence.
Makes sense.
Dorothy Brooke also had her trial postponed indefinitely. She was still in jail in 1648. Records are unsure if she ever got out, likely no. Joan Rowell was accused of bewitching to death John North and his daughter Rachel. She actually got acquitted. Go
Oh.
girl.
Look at
Go
her.
girl. Mary Johnson was tried and convicted of witchcraft on the testimony of neighbors. She was reprieved later, but the absence of records indicates she probably died in jail.
Sounds on par.
Alice Dixon, a widow, was accused of bewitching Thomas, son of John Mumford, a husbandman. I can't remember what that is.
Yeah. What is
Husbandman.
that?
I used to know. Anyway, let's see. Alice ends up being coerced to accuse other women of slipping an imp in the form of a rat through the door of Elizabeth and Daniel Oatley's house, bidding it to, quote, go rock the cradle. Johnson was accused of having given their small child an apple and a kiss the previous autumn, and the child subsequently died. It could be that simple. When children died at alarming rates.
Husbandman is a farmer.
Okay, yeah. Alice Dixon and Mary Johnson blamed each other for the child's demise. However, they were hanged.
Gosh.
Jesus Christ.
Dorothy Waters, 40, wife of a laborer. She was accused of sorcery and witchcraft, found guilty of entertaining an evil spirit in the likeness of a dun-colored mouse. This was endorsed by 2 men. She pleaded not guilty. However, she was sentenced to be hanged by the neck until she be dead. And she was reprieved, but remained in jail without bail, where she died in jail.
Damn.
So we have Elizabeth Clark. We already know. We talked about her. She was hanged. Sarah Bright, a widow. She was executed for causing the death of the daughter of a local landowner. So that's not good because he would have been a rich man.
You can't fuck with rich people's kids and stuff like that.
Elizabeth Gooding. She was the wife of an artisan shoemaker. In 1640, his business or their business was doing sufficiently well as to be on the tax list. And as the wife of a skilled tradesman, she may also have been seen as a respectable woman. However, she knew Elizabeth Clark and 2 other women that had been accused of witchcraft, and she had attended social gatherings at Elizabeth Clark's house. So therefore, guilty by association. And eventually women would tell on her as they were rounded up, and she was found guilty and hanged.
It is
Marion-
not good.
Marion Hockett, another widow, found guilty and executed. Her sister also accused. When searched, she was said to be harboring the devil's imps. She underwent a violent interrogation at jail and confessed, and she was also hanged, along with her sister. Elizabeth Harvey, 70-year-old widow, found guilty of entertaining evil spirits, each of which was in the shape of a mouse. She was reprieved, but died in jail.
Maybe these people just have a mice problem.
Yeah, there's just rats and rodents everywhere too.
Yeah.
Can we also point out the fact that there was just a civil war, so there's clearly abundance of widows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so many
Like-
widows.
And you're
Yes.
just like, nah, we're just wiping them out. Like,
Go on. You're
Yeah.
done.
oh god.
Yep. Sarah Hatton, accused of sorcery. She, of course, denied. She was tried and executed. And Thurston, she was accused of having 2 familiars, a bird and a mouse. Her biggest crime, however, was bewitching to death a black cow. These accusations were obviously unfounded, not proved in any way. Her fate is unknown. She was imprisoned in 1648, but no record of her after that.
She never got out. She got.
Likely not. Bridget Mayers, she was pardoned, again dies in jail after being pardoned. And Cade was a spinster who was hanged, being found guilty of witchcraft. And Leach, a poor widow, was searched for witches' marks, watched and interrogated. And she was one of the first ones to implicate everyone that visited at Elizabeth Clark's house. She was also found guilty of murdering a Richard Edwards baby son by witchcraft and was executed.
Now, who is committing all these murders also?
Yeah.
Like we've gone
These
through a
people are
number of-
dying of natural causes. These kids and stuff it was so, if you got a child
Yeah.
to the age of 6, you were starting
Doing
to
okay.
feel like they were going to make it. And
Damn.
tentatively things might be good, barring themselves, killing themselves in, a farming accident or food poisoning or the plague or
burning the
know,
house
Okay.
down,
Oh, or
tetanus or whatever else might befall you.
typhoid. all the fun
Yeah.
things.
Did
just
you-
everything.
You contracted dysentery. You were
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah.
You
Sad
didn't even
man.
make it out of the homestead.
You have consumption.
We're about to get to the end of our 29 women here. Helen Clark, her mother had also been, convicted. Her husband was a stonemason, but she was accused of murdering Mary and Edward Parsley's daughter Anne by bewitching her. and she was tried and hanged. Margaret Moon was condemned as a witch, including her daughter, accused of bewitching 2 children who had died in the community, another cow bewitcher, apparently. And she was sentenced to be hanged, but collapsed and died on the way to the gallows.
She just couldn't even.
Elizabeth Hare, accused by Mary Smith of giving her 2 imps, found guilty and hanged the next day.
Goddamn. That
Yeah.
was speedy.
Mary Starling, she was another one. She was found guilty, not hanged, but no record of her ever leaving jail. Susan Wentz, 70-year-old widow, convicted of entertaining 2 evil spirits. She was reprieved, but died in jail.
Oh, it sucks so bad.
It's not funny. It's just like it's ridiculous. Mary Cook was a widow. And yeah, another widow. Let's see. No record of what crime she was accused with, but she died of the plague while awaiting trial. Susan Cock, she was accused of having joined forces to bewitch a local carpenter's apprentice, amongst other acts of harmful magic. And she was reprieved but died in jail while awaiting release. Rose Hollybread, a poor 65-year-old widow, she was accused of keeping demonic imps and joining forces with other women in her town and using their imps to work witchcraft against the neighbors.
I still am really confused on like what these imps are and like how it just say it. Just,
So they're pets, basically. It's like a rabbit and your cat and
Yeah,
your
it's whenever you
mangy-looking
see-
dog.
Yeah.
I mean,
walking past them in the moment. They go,
that's
go
exactly.
It's
Imp.
familiar.
Yeah.
Imp.
So she dies of the plague in jail. And then last one, Joyce Bones was hanged for witchcraft in 1645. No record of what she actually did.
She did it all.
Um,
She was the worst.
Yeah, they couldn't even speak of it. Witches that were executed were often buried in pits under the gallows,
Ooh.
behind the jail, or in unconsecrated ground in the churchyard. Sometimes their bodies, this would be regional, would be held down by a stake or a rock to prevent them from rising on Judgment Day to heaven when all the, yeah.
God forbid they were like saved or whatever. Like
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, just to wrap up, so in just barely 2 years, Hopkins, Stern, and other witch finders had wreaked absolute havoc on Eastern England, impacting really thousands of lives, in the broad reach. And in the end, it was absolutely for nothing. Stern found himself the defendant in lawsuits to overturn wrongful convictions or accusations. I thought that was interesting. And towns were going after him to repay fees that they had paid to him. No record that ever happened. But the sad thing, Hopkins, we do know Hopkins' discovery of witches, his little pamphlet did make its way to Massachusetts with obvious repercussions. However, these men really are not solely to blame. They never really, and this is true, directly accused anyone of witchcraft. They really formed a business based on what the hysterics of
Mhm.
people that felt oppressed and
Vanity.
scared and didn't know and were looking for someone to blame for the chaos that was going on, in their world. And, the choice to prosecute the accused was always up to the victim of the bewitching and the parish watchers. So in reality, it didn't come down to these witch finders, whether these things, all they honestly did, and that's the only good thing you can really say, they would point them out. But, well, you know what I mean. But, it was really up to the perceived victim and the local authorities whether they went forward with this. For most of Stern, so Hopkins was really lucky that he died young. Stern was definitely not lauded for his role as a witch finder. It was quite the opposite for most of his life. He received great hostility towards him. And, Hopkins was basically just regarded as a total fool. And, to answer the question of, I really couldn't think of a better way than what the author kind of sums up in in this book about why, like the why of, neighbor versus neighbor and all these things. So he says, all of this prompts the question, how different are we in mentality from our 17th century ancestors? The truth that many find unpalatable, even inconceivable, is that in our ideas, instincts, and emotions, we are not very different at all. Without peace and prosperity, liberty and welfare, and the political and economic stability on which those things depend, the thinking of the next generations in the West might swerve off in an altogether more mystical and malevolent direction. The bloodletting in the developing world is too startlingly similar to that which occurred in England during the Civil War for this not to be so. Then, as now, witch hunts involve not just savage persecutors tormenting innocent scapegoats, but ordinary neighbors with a close affinity to one another who also happen to believe in witchcraft powerfully enough to act out their most violent fantasies. As a consequence, the 17th century tragedy of the witch-finders is only partially that of Matthew Hopkins, the flawed protagonist, and of the harrowing deaths of his victims. It is at least as much a tale about feeling anxious and vulnerable in an indifferent world, a sensation of humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, he summed that up pretty good.
It's
I mean,
it's
we saw it in World War II. We saw it
Yeah.
in World War One. History repeats itself for the
constantly
same
repeated.
Mhm.
themes. So yeah, it's an
It's just
unfortunate. The
wild
why is
that people take advantage. Like the perfect sinister person in the perfect time in the perfect place to just walk around and lightly suggest.
Hey,
Mm,
that's a
mm,
witch.
yep. And then the
yeah,
town just
That's
goes
it.
nuts and starts killing
yeah.
everybody. And
That's
then they just walk
23
away
shillings,
whistling.
please.
Then it's
Yep.
oopsies.
Yeah. Bye. Have a good
Yeah.
time.
Then we repent for a while, and then it happens
Mm,
again. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's pretty crazy.
That
It's
was.
crazy that like there's again, I just one guy's account of like or one guy who is a witch hunter.
general.
Yeah. Like hey,
Self-appointed.
yeah, but he was doing the job. Shit.
Yep.
Doing the Lord's work, apparently.
So
Wow.
he thought. I don't know if he's thinking that nowadays.
Well,
Rob's not.
I wonder how many guys came back from the war and were like, "Hey, where's my girlfriend? Where's my wife?"
It's like, oh, about
Oh,
that.
she was a witch.
Oh,
We got a little
what?
crazy. We had a
What?
There's
little
a
bump
lot
in the
going on.
road.
I've been dodging catapults and fucking sword fighting for the last like 2
Yeah.
years, and now you
Or
threw
it
my
could be
wife
like,
in a river?
yeah, like
Rebecca's
whole
not here anymore?
families, I mean, it would be like sisters and moms and daughters, and yeah, it was a hot mess.
That's
Yeah.
why I came back and just blamed the motherfucker. But get Hopkins.
And then we did it
It's
in
just
America a few short years later.
yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Learned nothing.
Well, never.
No, but we didn't compared to them there and that thing, that's something we didn't do as well. Well,
Yeah.
I say
Yes.
that's not really what I mean, but like America's the go big or go home country.
Yeah.
We take everything England did and bump it up, except that we couldn't hack it.
Yeah.
We got busy.
So, yeah,
I
that's all
wonder
I got.
too, they had more pagans and like that whole like thing was still dying out and like
Mhm.
there was
Yeah. Well, you
yeah,
still had that, the church at war
Druids
with,
and stuff.
yeah,
mhm. And again, you would have all of that rise and fall. Well, that's the thing, even with the witchcraft, depending who the monarchy was, some didn't care at all. I mean, it was
Yeah.
always on the books, that like a lot of that was illegal, but
Yeah.
nobody enforced it, you know.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like spitting on the sidewalk, a lot of cities and states and whatever have that as a law, from back in the 1800s or whatever, but nobody's going to probably go to jail for that now. But
No.
but then you would get somebody else that would come into power that was all about it, and all of a sudden it's a big hairy deal.
Yeah.
Here I am.
So,
Just
well,
repeating it over and
another
over.
interesting thing, they actually, not in Eastern England, I don't remember if it was Scotland or I think it was Scotland or if it was just another part of England. But anyway, around the time that Matthew Hopkins was going around, they were actually burning a witch.
Oh
Um,
shit.
I was gonna say, yeah, no one got burned.
Yeah.
No, and but this is my point with that. So apparently, one of the main reasons was because it was too expensive.
It's hard to burn a person.
The pitch.
Yeah.
It was a waste,
Yeah.
and it was expensive to do that for just like for one
Yeah.
person, what it would take. And
You're
so
not wasting the
that's
good wood on
that's
the witch.
really the only reason that
Mm.
that we're hanging, just because it was cost effective, which I mean I'm okay with, because that.
You always reuse
But
the rope.
I didn't know though that most of the time they killed the witch before setting them on fire. I did not know that.
Oh.
Well, it's so nice of them.
Yeah.
They would either do a punch, like a special punch that would stop their heart, or like a back of the head thing.
Oh shit. Yeah. I just thought they straight up like alive.
I did too, so I felt slightly relieved by that. I'm sure it
That's a
didn't happen.
terrible fucking way to go.
I'm sure it didn't happen always, but apparently, author mentions that in the book that
I feel like that's the kind of thing that would get like lost in the instructions in America. Like,
oh,
why are they screaming so much? I was in England and they didn't scream this
they
much.
didn't scream at all. I don't
Yeah,
understand. She's
what are
not.
what's going on here?
Well, they
It's
probably just thought that was more witchy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's like the demons coming
They're
out of her.
cackling.
Yes,
I was like, no, motherfucker, I'm on fire.
right.
Well, more humanity sucking.
Wah wah.
Wildly
But-
crazy interesting though. That's so wild to just think that like so many people just by like you.
Yeah,
Witch.
just
You're
because
the
you
witch.
didn't like your neighbor, or they happened to like ride their bicycle by your house, and then the next day your dog died.
Right.
Oh.
I mean, it was as simple as that. And like the
Man.
bewitching of the cow, and like their children dying. Like, I saw her yesterday, and then my child died.
Your
I mean,
neighbor's
that's
cow keeps getting out
literally
of their fucking farm and coming
how-
over to your yard.
Yeah.
And that's
Like, you know
literally
what?
how silly it was, how it got.
Bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mild
So, yeah.
inconveniences turned into witchcraft.
Mm-hmm. But yeah,
to all you witches out there, stay strong.
Stay strong, witches.
We're not coming for you anymore. So
We just want to love you.
use your hexes effectively.
Yes,
use
no-
use it for good.
yes, no darkness, please.
Oh. All right, guys. Well, that's our witchy episode wrapped up. Next month, like we said, we will be tackling a whole bunch of alien content.
Yes.
Some very common stuff, some less common. I got my eye, I'm looking on a few to try to like bring something completely new in.
Mm.
We're gonna have a special guest. Not really
Whoop,
special.
whoop.
He's kind of a jerk.
Wow,
That's what
that is not how we treat our guests, everyone.
This you'll see. This guest we could treat that way. It's okay. If you haven't subscribed already, do that shit.
Would.
Like, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell,
Ding.
just like that.
Absolutely. And if you have any suggestions for topics, please let us know, comment, or email us at.
SSOSpodcast@gmail.com.
You could also email us if you want to be a guest on the show. If you have any paranormal or high strangeness stories that you'd like to share with us, please share them with us. If you don't want to be a guest on the show, we will read your story in a guest story episode. Anything else, guys?
No, that's it.
That's it.
I do want to say, if you did hop on the live stream, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
For
Yes,
sure.
it's
Thank
much
you. That was a lot of
appreciated.
fun.
Yes.
All right, guys. Other than that,
Bye.
Strange.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to join us as a guest, suggest a topic, or have a story you want us to share, we'd love to hear from you. email us at SSOSpodcast@gmail.com. For more behind-the-scenes updates and exclusive insights about SSOS, make sure to follow us on social media. And don't miss out on the fun. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, thank you for listening to the Secret Society of Strangers podcast. This show is an independent production, researched and crafted by our passionate team. But we couldn't do it without all of you. We truly appreciate your support. Embrace the unknown, for not all secrets are meant to be kept. Farewell, strangers.